The Zalgren warship hung in the black void of space, a cold leviathan bristling with weapons and arrogance. Inside its gleaming corridors, the air buzzed with the hum of alien machinery and the soft murmurs of its crew. At the center of it all stood Overlord Vostok, his sinewy frame cloaked in ceremonial armor that gleamed like liquid silver. His violet eyes, cold and calculating, studied the holographic display of Earth spinning lazily before him. "They will fold," Vostok said, his voice a low hiss that reverberated through the command chamber. "Humans are fragile. Their history reeks of compromise. A few displays of power, a few losses, and they will crawl to us, begging for terms." Behind him, his chief advisor, Kalir, hesitated. The Zalgrens had studied humanity extensively before making contact, dissecting their wars, their politics, and their tendencies towards self-destruction. But Kalir had begun to notice cracks in the Overlord's assumptions. The humans had responded to their initial overtures of dominance not with fear but with defiance. It was unsettling. On Earth, Admiral Ethan Blake stood before a wide screen displaying the same enemy ship. His sharp features were illuminated by the dim blue glow of the war room, his piercing gaze steady as he listened to the Zalgrens' latest transmission. Behind him, a team of strategists and military officers worked in synchronized silence, their tension palpable. The Zalgrens had given humanity one final warning: surrender Earth's resources or face annihilation. Blake's lips twitched, though it wasn't quite a smile. "They still think we'll negotiate," he said, almost to himself. "Admiral." Dr. Alina Torres, the head of the Earth Defense Coalition's Tactical Analysis Division, stepped forward. Her presence was commanding, despite her slight frame. Her dark hair was pulled into a no-nonsense bun, and her sharp green eyes carried an intensity that rivaled Blake's. "They've underestimated us from the start," she said, placing a data pad on the table. "Their analysis of humanity is outdated. They assume we're fractured, incapable of unified resistance. What they don't realize is that we've had decades to prepare for something like this." Blake leaned forward, studying the holographic projection Alina activated. It showed the Zalgren fleet's current formation, its weaker points highlighted in red. "They're overconfident," Torres continued. "Their positioning suggests they believe this will be over quickly. We can use that." Blake nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "What's the status of our defenses?" "Orbital cannons are operational, and the decoy satellites are in place," Torres replied. "If they attack, we'll bleed them before they reach the atmosphere. And if they don't attack? Then we'll provoke them." Blake raised an eyebrow at that, and Torres's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "They're not here to negotiate, Admiral. They're here to take. The sooner we make that clear to them, the better." Hours later, aboard the Zalgren warship, Vostok paced, his irritation growing with each passing moment. The humans had not responded to his ultimatum. Instead, they had launched a covert operation that left one of their smaller vessels damaged. The audacity of it stung more than the act itself. It was as if the humans were mocking them. "They are testing us," Vostok growled, turning to Kalir. "A mistake that will cost them dearly." Kalir hesitated again. "Overlord, perhaps we should reconsider." "No." Vostok's voice cracked like a whip. "They will not dictate the terms of this encounter. Begin preparations for an assault. A small one. Let them see what resistance earns them." On Earth, the response to the Zalgren assault was swift and brutal. The alien vessels that breached the outer defense perimeter were met with fire so precise and unrelenting that even seasoned Zalgren pilots faltered. In the chaos of the skirmish, a human stealth ship slipped undetected into the enemy fleet. Inside that stealth vessel, Captain Lena Moros and her team moved with military precision. They had one mission: gather intelligence on the Zalgren's command hierarchy and vulnerabilities. Lena's gloved hand hovered over the console as they intercepted enemy communications. "They think we're uncoordinated," she murmured, disbelief mingling with grim amusement. "Good. Let them think that." Her second-in-command, a grizzled veteran named Major Harris, chuckled softly. "Overconfidence makes them sloppy. We'll show them how wrong they are." When Lena's team extracted a critical data packet and retreated undetected, the human leadership pounced on the opportunity. The intercepted files revealed the Zalgrin's over-reliance on a rigid command structure. Disable their leaders, and their forces would crumble. Back in the war room, Blake and Torres analyzed the data. "They've underestimated us at every turn," Torres said, her tone edged with satisfaction. "It's almost insulting." Blake smirked. "Let's make them regret it." The Zalgrin fleet's next move came swiftly. A larger assault force descended toward Earth, bristling with destructive intent. But humanity was ready. As the aliens advanced, decoy satellites activated, drawing fire away from critical infrastructure. Ground-based railguns and missile systems targeted the attackers with ruthless precision. For every human life lost, the Zalgrins paid tenfold. Their initial confidence gave way to confusion as their formations collapsed under Earth's relentless counterattacks. In the command center of the Zalgrin flagship, Vostok seethed. He had expected a weak and fractured foe. Instead, he faced an adversary that fought like a cornered predator, vicious, cunning, and unrelenting. "This is not how it was supposed to go," he snarled, slamming a fist onto the control panel. KLIR stepped forward cautiously. "Overlord, perhaps we should consider." "Enough." Vostok's voice shook the chamber. "They will fall. All creatures fall when enough pressure is applied. We will break them yet." Back on Earth, Blake and Torres exchanged a glance as the latest battle report came in. The Zalgrins were retreating, for now. But they both knew this was far from over. "They won't stop," Blake said. "Not until they understand one thing." "And what's that?" Torres asked. "That humanity doesn't negotiate." The room fell silent as Blake's words hung in the air, a promise and a warning. Earth's defenses were holding, but the war had only just begun. The Zalgrin fleet loomed over the void like a dark storm, its vessels arranged in an imposing formation designed to intimidate. For centuries, such a display had been enough to crush resistance across countless systems. But Earth was proving to be an anomaly, a thorn in their talons that refused to be dislodged. Overlord Vostok stood at the helm of his flagship, his violet eyes narrowed as he stared at the tactical projections. "Overlord, our scouts report increased activity near Earth's orbital platforms," KLIR said cautiously, his voice low. "The humans are fortifying their defenses." "Good," Vostok replied, his tone laced with contempt. "Let them scramble. Their desperation will make their fall all the more satisfying." KLIR hesitated but said nothing. He had seen the humans' resolve firsthand. Their resistance was not born of desperation but something deeper, something the Zalgrins had failed to predict. It unnerved him, but he knew better than to voice his doubts again. On Earth, Admiral Blake surveyed the holographic map of the incoming Zalgrin fleet. His expression was as calm and unyielding as steel, though the tension in the room was palpable. Around him, officers moved with practiced efficiency, their voices clipped as they relayed reports and analyzed data. "They're bringing everything this time," Blake said, his gaze fixed on the map. "They want to make an example of us." "And we'll give them one instead," Dr. Torres replied, her voice steady. She stood beside him, her fingers flying across a tablet as she updated their defensive strategy. Blake glanced at her. "Are the satellites ready?" "Fully operational," Torres confirmed. "And the decoys are in place. When they attack, they'll be shooting blind." Blake nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities. The Zalgrins were relentless, but their overconfidence made them predictable. That predictability was a weakness Blake intended to exploit. Above Earth, the first wave of Zalgrin ships broke formation, descending toward the planet's defenses. Their weapons fired in synchronized bursts, cutting through the void with deadly precision. But instead of striking critical infrastructure, their attacks were drawn to decoy satellites and dummy installations. Inside one of the Zalgrin vessels, Commander Zalvok growled in frustration as his targeting systems failed to lock onto meaningful targets. "They're toying with us," he hissed. On the ground, Torres watched the chaos unfold on the tactical display, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "They're committing too early," she said. "It's exactly what we wanted." Blake didn't respond, his focus on the larger fleet that still hovered ominously in orbit. He knew this skirmish was only the prelude. The real challenge would come when the Zalgrins deployed their main forces. As the battle in orbit raged, A small, unmarked human vessel slipped through the chaos, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible. On board, Captain Lena Moros and her team prepared for their next mission. "Target acquired," Lena said, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. She gestured toward the holographic display, which showed the Zalgren flagship in chilling detail. Major Harris leaned over her shoulder, his expression grim. "We really going after their command ship?" Lena's lips curved into a tight smile. "We are. And we're not leaving empty-handed." The mission was simple in theory but perilous in execution. Infiltrate the Zalgren flagship, extract critical data on their fleet's vulnerabilities, and get out alive. Lena's team was among the best, but even they couldn't ignore the odds stacked against them. As the human vessel closed in on the Zalgren flagship, Lena gave her team one last look. "No mistakes," she said. "We get in, we get what we need, and we get out." "Understood." A chorus of nods and murmured affirmations followed. Back on Earth, Blake and Torres monitored the battle from the command center. Reports of the Zalgren fleet's disarray came pouring in, but neither allowed themselves a moment of relief. They both knew the Zalgrens were far from defeated. "They'll regroup," Torres said. "They always do. But they're showing signs of stress." Blake's expression darkened. "Stress isn't enough. We need them broken." Torres tapped her tablet, bringing up a series of intercepted Zalgren communications. "If Lena's team succeeds, we'll have what we need to do just that." On the Zalgren flagship, alarms blared as Lena's team moved through the labyrinthine corridors. Their stealth suits rendered them invisible to most detection systems, but the tension was palpable. Every step they took brought them closer to discovery and death. They reached the data core, a massive, pulsating structure that housed the ship's most sensitive information. Lena placed a small device on the core's surface, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Extraction in progress," she whispered. The device blinked rapidly as it began downloading the data. Around her, her team kept watch, their weapons ready. The seconds stretched into an eternity before the device beeped softly, signaling completion. Lena removed it and nodded to her team. "Let's move." Their escape was anything but smooth. The Zalgrens detected their presence as they neared the hangar bay, forcing the team into a desperate firefight. Blaster fire echoed through the corridors as Lena and her team fought their way to their ship. By the time they reached the vessel and launched into the chaos of the orbital battle, Lena was bruised and breathless but alive. "We've got what we need," she said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. When the data reached Earth's command center, Torres's eyes lit up. "They're more vulnerable than we thought," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Their entire fleet relies on a centralized command system. If we can take out their leadership, the rest will collapse." Blake's jaw tightened as he stared at the data. "Then that's what we'll do." The Zalgren fleet regrouped, their losses mounting but their determination unshaken. Vostok's fury was palpable as he barked orders, his confidence replaced by simmering rage. "They will not make fools of us again," he snarled. "Prepare the fleet for a full-scale assault. We will crush them, no matter the cost." On Earth, Blake and Torres stood side by side, their gazes fixed on the tactical display. The Zalgrens were coming, and humanity was ready. "They think they can break us," Blake said, his voice low but resolute. Torres glanced at him, a hint of a smile on her lips. "They don't realize we've already broken them." As the next phase of the war loomed, Earth's defenders prepared for the fight of their lives. The Zalgrens had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The sky above Earth burned with streaks of fire as the Zalgren fleet descended in full force, their ships blotting out the stars. The air was thick with tension, the weight of impending devastation pressing down on soldiers and civilians alike. In the war room of the Earth Defense Coalition, Admiral Blake stood at the center of the chaos, his voice cutting through the din like a blade. "Status report," he demanded, his tone as sharp as the lines of his uniform. "Our orbital defenses are holding, but barely," an officer replied, her fingers flying across a console. "The Zalgrens are focusing fire on our primary satellites. Ground-based railguns are at 78% capacity." Blake nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "They're trying to blind us. Redirect secondary platforms to counter their bombardment." They can't hit what they can't see. Dr. Torres stepped into the room, her tablet in hand and her face a mask of calm determination. Admiral, the data from the Zalgren flagship confirms it. Their entire fleet relies on centralized coordination. If we take out their command ship, the rest will fall apart. Blake turned to her, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. And what are the chances they've realized we know that? They're overconfident, Torres replied. Even now. They think we're too disorganized to act decisively. Blake allowed himself a faint smile. Then let's disprove them. The battle in orbit intensified as human forces engaged the Zalgrens with every weapon at their disposal. Massive railguns on the surface roared to life, their projectiles tearing through the void to strike alien ships with devastating precision. Swarms of human fighters darted between enemy vessels, their pilots pushing their machines to the limit. In the cockpit of one such fighter, Captain Jenna Reyes gritted her teeth as she weaved through a barrage of enemy fire. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, her hands gripping the controls tightly. She fired her weapons in quick bursts, her shot striking a Zalgren ship's engine and sending it spiraling out of control. "Nice shot, Reyes," her wingman called over the comm. "No time for compliments," she replied. "We've got more incoming." As the battle raged above, the Zalgrens made their move on the surface. Drop ships descended through the atmosphere, their hulls glowing red-hot from the friction. When they landed, they unleashed waves of alien soldiers, their weapons cutting through Earth's defenses like scythes through wheat. In the trenches outside New London, Sergeant Marcus Cole barked orders to his squad, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Hold the line. Aim for their weak points." The Zalgrens were relentless, their tall, sinewy forms moving with terrifying precision. But the humans were prepared. Makeshift barricades funneled the enemy into kill zones, where railgun emplacements and concentrated fire tore them apart. Cole ducked as an alien projectile whizzed past his head, then popped up to fire his rifle. The Zalgren soldier in his sights crumpled to the ground, its weapon clattering uselessly beside it. "They're not so tough once you hit 'em," Cole said, a grim smile on his face. Above the battlefield, Blake and Torres watched the unfolding carnage on the holographic display. The Zalgren fleet was pressing hard, their command ship hovering ominously at the rear of their formation like a predator biding its time. "That's the target," Torres said, pointing to the glowing representation of the Zalgren flagship. "If we can disable it, their entire operation will collapse." Blake nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then we don't wait for an opportunity. We create one." He turned to his communications officer. "Patch me through to all units." A moment later, his voice echoed across every channel, reaching soldiers, pilots, and commanders alike. "This is Admiral Blake. The Zalgrens think they can break us, that they can intimidate us into submission. But they don't understand what it means to be human. They don't understand our resilience, our determination. Today, we show them. Today, we make them regret ever setting foot in our skies." Cheers erupted across the lines, a surge of defiant energy that rippled through the ranks. Blake turned to Torres. "It's time. Launch the strike team." Aboard a sleek, heavily armed human frigate, Captain Lena Moros prepared for what might be her final mission. Her team was tasked with infiltrating the Zalgren flagship and planting a device that would disrupt its command systems. "This is it," Lena said, her voice steady but solemn. "If we succeed, we end this war. If we fail—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Her team nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew the stakes. As the frigate approached the Zalgren fleet, its cloaking systems engaged, the tension was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity as they slipped through enemy lines, their fate hanging by a thread. When they reached the flagship, Lena led her team through its labyrinthine corridors, their movements swift and silent. The Zalgrens were too focused on the larger battle to notice the intruders until it was too late. By the time the humans planted the device and began their escape, the Zalgren flagship was already reeling from internal chaos. Systems failed, communications went dark, and the fleet's coordination unraveled. On Earth, Blake watched as the holographic display showed the Zalgren fleet faltering. One by one, their ships began to fall out of formation, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. "They're done," Torres said, her voice tinged with satisfaction. Blake didn't smile. Not yet. Finish it. Project Ragnarok, Earth's most devastating weapon, activated. A massive beam of concentrated energy erupted from the planet's surface, striking the Zalgren flagship with surgical precision. The ship exploded in a blinding flash of light, taking with it the last remnants of the Zalgren's command structure. The remaining alien vessels scattered, their cohesion shattered. Without orders, they were nothing more than aimless predators, easy prey for humanity's relentless counterattack. As the last Zalgren ship was destroyed, a cheer erupted across Earth. In the war room, Blake allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. "It's over," Torres said, exhaling deeply. "For now," Blake replied, his tone somber. He turned to the display of Earth, scarred but still standing. "But we'll be ready if they come again." In the ruins of the Zalgren fleet, a single escape pod drifted aimlessly through the void. Inside, Kelair stared out at the stars, his mind racing. He had underestimated humanity, as had his entire species. They had believed humans to be weak, predictable. They had been wrong. As Kelair floated alone in the vast emptiness, he whispered a warning to the universe. "Do not provoke them. The humans, they don't give a fuck."